Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invite, and I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. Right, we'll get straight into it. So to define environmental enrichment, this definition by Ruth Newberry says it is an improvement in the biological functioning of captive animals resulting from modifications to their environment. Now, what I've bolded there is really the very important thing: improvement in the biological functioning of captive animals. So when we think about environmental enrichment, I guess probably we think first off of zoo animals, but really environmental enrichment can be imposed or applied to any animals that we house, in quotes, in captivity. So lab animals, farm animals, zoo animals, companion animals. Now, thinking back to Ruth Newberry's definition about that improvement in biological functioning, Verbal and Garner have further classified enrichments into three classes. So I think one of the big problems is that a lot of times we think that when we add anything to an environment, it is enriching. Not always the case. So here, for example, first they talk about pseudo enrichments. So in this example here, we see marbles placed into an enclosure for lab animals, and that's certainly been used with the idea that, you know, this gives them something to do in the environment. Well, it's been that, they bury these marbles, but they're burying them because they are scared of them, not because they are actually enriching the environment. They then also talk about conditionally beneficial enrichments. So this, for example, would be a kind of nesting enclosure. Again, very lab animal based. Both Joe and Hanno are lab animal scientists primarily. But if you put in a nesting compartment or a nest into an enclosure, again with lab animals, in certain circumstances, it certainly can be beneficial, but it can also result in aggression sometimes. So therefore, again, there are things that if you put them into the environment and they become a source of aggression, then clearly can be beneficial, but can be conditionally beneficial, not always beneficial. If it results in fighting and the welfare of one of the animals being worse, then clearly it's not beneficial for that animal. And then finally, they do talk about beneficial enrichments. And as people working with animals, that is really what we're after. It's trying to find beneficial enrichments that will improve the biological functioning. So we might ask the question, why do we want to enrich pigs? Well, ultimately, I would say because it's the right thing to do, not only for the pig itself, but societally, we should be rearing our farm animals in conditions where they have good quality of life. And there are also demonstrated benefits, so in terms of productivity of the pigs themselves. So we'll go over some of these in a bit more detail. So why enrich pigs? Well, naturally, of course, they have very, very complex behavior, and the types of environments that we house them in intensive systems very often does not allow them to complete this complex behavioral repertoire that they have. They're also thought of as being very clever or smart, and indeed, you know, to the general public they are as well. So these are just headlines plucked out of the media. 5 farm animals that are probably smarter than your dog. Number 1 is pigs. Top 20 smartest animals in the world. Number 3, pigs. Out of all the animals on Earth, number 7, pigs. So there's a general consensus that the pig is a very smart and clever animal. And of course, we can see that because we can get them to perform various tasks, be it T-mazes or a maze to get through to reach other pigs. There's also the element of consumer expectations. So this is work done by Maria Herzl in the UBC group, Sato's first author, and they're asking consumers what they think is the ideal pig farm. And then a lot of times animal welfare components come up within what they think the ideal pig farm. They want their pigs to move about. They want access to outdoors, able to forage for food, have an enjoyable life, able to roam and play, access to toys. So a consumer is expecting pigs to be raised, more in this type of system than this type of system. I mean, this is gold standard, I would say, in terms of a pig environment. And this is a farm in southern Missouri that I've worked on. Whereas, of course, usually we're having our pigs, the majority of our pigs raised indoors in fairly intensive systems. And honestly, it is not really what the consumer expects or wants. And tying in with that, we very definitely have a changing retail landscape. So this is the Global Coalition for Animal Welfare, which has been going for quite a few years now, but it is expanding in terms of its membership. And when you see the members within that, I mean, there are some big players in here. I don't know how many of these are active in Latin America, but you've probably got some of the big food service industries like Sodexo and Aramark. Obviously, Unilever, Nestle are very definitely global companies. Starbucks global. Maple Leaf Tyson probably more North America. But whatever is happening, they have a mission. So the mission there is to develop and implement an action plan on priority animal welfare issues in global food production. And so what they are beginning to think, and I am working with Nestle and Tyson on environmental enrichment, is that they want kind of global standards, so that if they are sourcing product, they want the systems that product is coming from to be quite uniform across the world. So they don't want to be sourcing highly enriched product out of Europe and non-enriched product out of North America, for example. They are beginning to expect that all the products, so the pork in the case of Nestle and Tyson that I'm working with, they want that pork to come from systems that are similar from a global perspective. And then ultimately, I guess we have things like legislation and codes of practice. So obviously the EU, we have legislation now that says pigs must have permanent access to a sufficient quantity of material to enable proper investigation, manipulation activities, and they give a list of things that they would like to see. Similarly, in the UK, not surprisingly, because we were part of the EU, we want environmental enrichment which does not compromise the health of animals. And then in North America, we now have it in the Canadian Code of Practice that pigs must be provided with multiple forms of enrichment that aim to improve the welfare of animals through the enhancement of their physical and social environments. So clearly, in some countries and areas of the world, we have legislation that is considered so important for pigs to have environmental enrichment that it is within legislation or within codes of practice. And then, of course, it is within the terrestrial code. So when we move to Article 7.13.10 from the World Organization of Animal Health, we find that animals should be provided with an environment that provides complexity, manipulability, it's always a difficult word to say, cognitive stimulation. And the purpose of this is to foster normal behavior, improve physical and mental state. So when you think about the World Organization for Animal Health, I've lost count of the number of countries. I know it used to be 184 countries, I think, that was in it last time I checked. It might be more than that now. All these countries have signed off on this. And so there is that kind of expectation from a global perspective that we are providing enrichment for pigs. So when we think about what comprises enrichment, most often we do think of that physical enrichment, so the introduction of items, objects into the pen. But also included is things like social enrichment, so housing of pigs in groups. Again, we have a worldwide movement, I guess, away from that individual confinement, certainly of sows and gestation. There is talk of humans as social enrichment. There's definitely a very limited amount of time that humans will spend within pens interacting with pigs, but they can be seen as a source of social enrichment. There's also more work going on in terms of auditory enrichment, and also This one really kind of beginning, I think, a bit more, and I know there's some good projects in Europe that are definitely investigating the idea of olfactory enrichment at the moment, and it's going to be interesting to see the results that come out of those studies. So primarily what I'm going to focus on really in the rest of this talk is the physical, because that is I think one of the most easy things to do, and one of the most investigated or researched elements. And a lot of what we have lower down is the research is really still ongoing and we're still learning. So in terms of the types of properties that enrichment materials should have, we want to think of them as being edible, so pigs can eat them; chewable, so again, pigs can chew on them; investigable, pigs can investigate them; manipulable, so that pigs can change their location, their appearance or structure. So these are the terms that are kind of used to describe the types of enrichments that we use in a fairly consistent way. Now, additionally, enrichment materials should be provided so that they're sustainable, of sustainable interest. This is one of the elements that we do find, is that often we put an enrichment in, it gets a lot of use early on, and then the use tails off. So that's something that I think we need to do better at still, is trying to develop enrichments that are sustainably interesting. Accessible for oral manipulation, given in sufficient quantity. So again, coming back to that idea of conditionally beneficial enrichments. If you give an enrichment that causes competition, so not given in sufficient quantity, then that's not going to be a good thing. Clean and hygienic. So again, one of the most common things you see in terms of enrichment is that producers might throw a hard plastic ball in. You know, again, like I said, it will get some use and some interest early on. But then when it turns into this kind of state, it doesn't get interest. And if it does, obviously, it can also be a problem for spread of disease too. So again, we need to think of the types of enrichments that we can have that have those properties, but also have these properties as well. So when you weigh up the types of properties that the enrichment should have, we can then begin to categorize them into what we think are optimal. So it has all those characteristics and they could be used alone. Suboptimal, maybe they have some of the characteristics but need to be used in combination with other materials. And then we do have marginal materials. So maybe they provide distraction, but they really do not fulfill essential needs. And optimal and suboptimal materials should also be provided. So these types of materials that we put in probably do not have any kind of biological positive effect. So a lot of these there are obviously enrichments that you can buy off the shelf. A lot of these do tend to be kind of chewable, they're rubber, they're hard plastic, they're metal. So not very destructible from that point of view. You know, but there are things out there that would at least meet some of the legislation in terms of we are providing enrichment. Are they really enrichment? Judging by Newbery's definition, I think the jury is still out on quite a lot of these. One resource that I could send you towards, and this is a good one from a European project, is the training material is there on it's good training material on environmental enrichment, specifically tied to tail biting, but there is availability there in Spanish and in English and different languages. So that's a good resource for people to take note of. And so on that, we begin to see that, you know, they've looked at all these various enrichments and then tried to assess whether they meet those criteria of being edible, chewable, manipulable, and destructible in this case. So do they deform? And we see, you know, some of the most common things that are used are really not great. So chains really don't meet much. Plastic doesn't really do very well. Wood can begin to be okay. You know, if it's fairly soft, then they can certainly chew on it and begin to deform it. Cardboard can be good as long as it's, you've got to be careful of the type of cardboard that you're using so that it's not, I think, recycled and doesn't have issues with toxicity. Certainly it's chewable, destructible. One of the most favorite ones, the ball, really does nothing. Sack and rope begins to get some green as well, like the cardboard. Salt lick really doesn't do very much. Soil is good, certainly rootable, which pigs like. Wood chips, again, some green. Sawdust, some green. Straw racks, and now we're beginning to get up to the kind of fibrous materials that can quite often meet all of these properties. And indeed, when you get to things like straw, hay, and silage, so in terms of this EU project, what they have determined is that these three things really do meet all those properties and are really, really good enrichments. So I'm not going to read through this, but in terms of, again, it's just really kind of saying now what is optimal and what is suboptimal. And so we do see that, honestly, straw, hay, and silage are the only things that could be used alone and are determined as to be optimal in that they meet those requirements by themselves. Everything else we begin to see is suboptimal. And so where it's suboptimal, you need to be mixing and matching and putting in more than one of those enrichments to meet the four properties. We keep going down. Oops. This is putting straw hay or silage in a rack. So that's another way that we can present it. And then when we get down to, again, those things that are most common, I think, within industry, certainly here in North America, the addition of a chain. We've got very hard wood, hard plastic, soft plastic, that ball, rubber. All of these really are determined to be marginal. And so if you're going to put these in, it's not good enough to put these in by themselves. You really need to be augmenting that with more on this list. So this is another good resource out there for you from World Animal Protection. Kate Blazak as the author on this one, but it's good. It contains some really good information, and it's available there as a PDF, Provision for Enrichment, Why It Matters for Animals and Business. And it does include some case studies from different parts of the world where different types of enrichment at a local level are being used. And so that's a good resource for you to look at when you're thinking about what can you use to provide enrichment within your system. Because one of the big concerns with putting in organic material is that of the biosecurity. And certainly it is possible that straw and hay especially could be come in as a carrier, and also there are mycotoxins within that. I mean, you can test for mycotoxins before putting in. And honestly, it can happen, but it is rare. There may well be a bit more dust in straw, facilities with straw for sure, maybe some respiratory illness. But overall, there are much more positives than negatives for using this type of enrichment.
Thanks, Patrick.
Don't forget to bring the gobble down with you.
And so welfare positives here listed, again, I'm not going to read them all, but there are a lot of behavioral positives in having this type of enrichment, straw, improving the health, improving play, increasing activity, also gives the pigs access to thermal preference. You know, if they're slightly cold, they can bury in the straw and get warm. If they're hot, they can move out into a different zone. So it increases animal choice as well. There are production benefits. So there's science to back all these up. It can improve growth, reduce antibiotic use, help with that highly stressful time period of weaning, improving piglet survival in the farrowing house, improve resilience and resistance to disease, improve meat quality, reduce aggression. So there's a lot of positives there in terms of production and the science that backs that up. And just one example is this paper that I really like out of Wageningen. And they're looking at barren housing and enriched housing and looking at things like behavior. And we see where we've got enriched housing, which is the red. We're seeing that it reduces that oral manipulation of pig on pig. It reduces mounting. It reduces other behaviours as well. I just plucked this one as an example. It was also a disease challenge experiment, and so first they challenged them with PERS. Both treatments do get PERS. So they react and produce that response to PERS the same. But what we find is those in enriched housing begin to clear the illness quicker. And then it was a double challenge. This is followed up by pleuropneumonia challenge. And again, this one is just the rectal temperature. We see that the temperature is the same, so they do react similarly post the PERS thing. But then when that second challenge, what we've got is that we see a sustained, what looks like a sustained infection for those pigs that are housed in the barren environment, but a quicker recovery for those pigs that are housed in an enriched environment. So this is a study that shows multiple benefits in terms of behaviour and health for enrichment. So it's not to say that we've got to go to extreme. It's not saying that all pigs need to be housed in this type of system. What we can do is to bring it down into different degrees of enrichment, if you like. I mean, it might well be that where we've got fully slatted systems, obviously we're not going to be able to go to full straw bedding, for example, and we're going to have to find ways to deliver our enrichment in a different way. And we're only now beginning to really move towards this within North America, and again we have this issue of fully slatted systems, and really, but even putting in marginal enrichments to begin with, which is still part of this nice Nestle and Tyson study, is that we have to start somewhere, and hopefully progressively move forward, and hopefully within this type of system we'll be organic material and put, straw in racks and things like that. So overall, I would say that the pressure is mounting for us to change that space within pig production. And we're not just talking about the quantity of space. Clearly we're moving away from close confinement systems for sows into group gestation. We're beginning to think about talking at least about open farrowing and moving away from farrowing crates as well. But that quantity of space, I think, a lot of the argument has been about, well, the welfare of both gestation crates and alternative systems in North America and the US, especially, has been the same. Both equally good is the word that a lot of organizations use. I would contend that they're both equally bad. And it's not until we actually begin to think about the quality of that space that we begin to really improve the welfare of the pigs. And so we need to think about enrichment. We need to think about environmental choice. Clearly, where we have that fully bedded system, we get some environmental choice. And we need to think about that flooring substrate. If we're keeping pigs in housing environments where we cannot begin to put in bedding, then that's always going to be a bit of an issue. And moving forward, I mean, the long-term solution is we need to be thinking about our systems and moving towards developing systems that meet the needs of pigs better. And so that will improve welfare, emotional state, health, and ultimately productivity. So we are thinking of win-win. And in terms of, if we're improving the welfare, we have multiple advantages to doing that. We improve the industry image. We improve that social sustainability, which is going to be important. The idea of this social license that the public will enable us to raise pigs in a way that they see fit, not just in a way that we see fit as an industry. Improving economic sustainability, reduce that risk of legislation. Much better to really move towards things voluntarily than to have things imposed, especially in timelines that might be quite challenging. Another big issue we have in North America is that idea of labour. And I don't know whether it's the same in Latin America, but we want to have environments which are nicer to work in. So improving worker recruitment and retention. We're seeing in North America again an increased demand for alternative proteins. So again, coming into improving economic sustainability. If part of that move towards alternative proteins is because the public, the consumer, does not like the way we rear pigs, then we need to be thinking about changing the way we rear pigs. And then also another societal benefit is that reduced need for antimicrobials, improving welfare as a method of reducing disease and reducing that need for antimicrobials. So final slide, really, enrichment is going to be demanded at some point by stakeholders, I think. In terms of beneficial enrichments, it does take some planning, coordinating, and rotating as well. If pigs begin to not use the enrichment, then we need to think about rotating enrichment, so to get them back interested in the new enrichment coming in. But importantly, enrichment can improve welfare, productivity, social sustainability, and more. So I really do think that by improving that enrichment is a key to moving forward in the way that we have housed our pigs in intensive systems.
What do you say about companies that have, as for example, only one change in each part of animals? For example, adding other materials may incur an additional cost, and the producer, they may have not want to pay. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the economics is definitely an important issue, and I don't think it's one that we've really explored yet. I mean, even just before coming on here, I tried to find whether there is any paper that really details the economics, both in terms of the cost of enrichment materials, the labor needed to maintain those materials, and then what is the benefit. If we talk about them having production benefits, we do need to see that costed out. I mean, I think there is economic benefit. Clearly, there's a lot of things that enrichment can improve, but we have not done that economic research that we really need to back that up with, I think. Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
Thank you so much. Okay, the second one, and I just, because of time, I have to just mention a few of them, is can you tell about, what you can tell us about human as social enrichment? What is this? Is there any research about that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits of having the human as social enrichment is it does improve that human-animal relationship. Having fearful pigs is never a good thing. I mean, the big issue is, how much time does the human need to spend with pigs to really have a beneficial effect? I've been part of a project in Australia, and that's been looking at that very early human contact and what kind of welfare benefits that has throughout life. And we're actually now in the process of writing a second grant that's going to investigate the amount of time. We'll vary the amount of time, and that will become one of the treatments to see. But it's, it's a lot to ask. So even if you're thinking, well, 2 minutes in a pen, 3 days a week, for example, well, that adds up when you've got a swine unit. Some of the swine units we have over here in the US could be, 10,000 sows, could be 50,000 pigs. 2 minutes with each of those pigs, or in each pen of those pigs, is a lot of time. So it's down there as a social enrichment, but I think it's one of those areas that it's bit in its infancy and needs a lot more work being done on.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. The rest of the questions I will try to share it with you on the chat, because there are many for you, and a lot of congratulations for your presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.